Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Adobe plugins tutorial. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to make a simple posterize time effect which essentially changes the frame rate of your video. Now this is going to be based on a simple example, probably the skeleton example, and we're just going to be using a few lines of code in order to calculate what the user gives in as an input for our new frame rate, as well as changing the actual appearance to the correct frame essentially. We're going to be going over all this today, and before we get started, I do want to remind you down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel, and down in the description you can check out the link for the code for this in the GitHub link. Follow us there for coding updates, and in the description follow us on Instagram for other live updates. If you're not already a member of the Discord server, you can come and join and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, submit tutorial ideas, and much more. And if you'd like to help support the YouTube channel and get cool perks, now is the best time to join, as I'm finally ahead of schedule and will now continually have perks coming out for all these members, supporters, premium supporters, and VIPs who are supporting us and getting Discord status. Alright, so let's just get started. I'm going to load up a example project. Let's go ahead and just do, I think we should do Smarty Pants. I believe Smarty Pants, it looks like in this case, is just inverting the pixels. Let's go ahead and just build it and see what it looks like from scratch. And then we can go in and pretty easily change it to work and posterize time. So I'll go ahead and set my debug location as the After Effects exe. And let's see if we can build and run this. It seems to have no problem building it. Maybe I changed the settings incorrectly. Yeah, I changed the release version. Needs to be in the debug version. In fact, I'll just copy this path, put it in the debug, save our changes, and now we should be able to run this and test out to see what this actually does to our layer. What we're obviously going to be doing is changing the frame rate of our footage today, but we want to know what this base plugin we're using first does in order to understand properly what we're going to be changing. So I'll go ahead and just drop in this clip, go to sample plugins, and we'll apply Smarty Pants. And as we can see, this is simply inverting our colors. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to replace all these UI elements, and we just want a frame rate slider. Then we need to change the frame rate based on that. So the first thing I'm going to do is quickly adjust our interface. The way I'm going to do this is by first going into my header file, my main Smarty Pants header file, and we're going to change our enumeration here. We don't have our color blend, colored ID, and all this stuff. We simply need to use one property, which we'll call frame rate disk ID. Actually, I think this is the only one we need. So we'll set it equal to 1. And then we'll go ahead and go into our CPP file, our param setup, where we make our UI. And we don't want this first thing here, this drop down. So we have here add param, add param. This is actually adding parameters in quite a roundabout way. It's defining them before it does anything. So we'll just go with it. And we're going to change this to actually, we're just going to remove this first param completely from the AEFX clear struct down to, and we add the param. Now we just have this slider. We want a float slider. That's good. We don't want to display a percentage. Let's see what the other display flags are. We have precision display flags. Let's just remove this. We don't need a percentage. Precision, I'm going to make 3. I believe that's tenths, hundredth. And then the layer param name, I'm just going to manually input. It's going to be our frame rate. And then since this is a smart effects, we're going to go into the smart render. We don't have these other properties. We just have what's it called? Frame rate disk ID. But this is actually defined a little bit differently than a lot of the other smart effects things I've seen. This is defined as an index in our H file. Interesting. So let's replace, we have our Smarty input, which is 0, and we have our Smarty frame rate. And we'll delete the other one and keep the num params. It should be 2. That should be good there. We'll copy our Smarty frame rate. We're going to keep the Smarty name, and we'll make sure we check that out. I don't yet have a Smart Effects tutorial out, but this will give you some kind of hints. Again, we're in the Smart Render function, and we're checking out our parameters. In this case, we just have a frame rate. So we have that, and we have it attached to something called the blend param. We'll call this frame rate param. Don't need the channel param. We have our frame rate param. We'll remove this. We'll need to change it out of our actually render. So we our frame rate param pointer. And then I believe that should give us the right value. Let's go ahead and add a breakpoint in our actually render function and restart this. I'm going to go ahead and add a breakpoint in our render function here. And actually, first we have a whole bunch of errors we need to fix. This isn't Smarty channel. This should be frame rate. We don't have anything called blend. So we'll just get rid of anything that uses that. Channel param doesn't exist. Here we want to check out this parameter we previously just checked in, frame rate param. We have Smarty channel. This again should be frame rate. And can we build that? Or are we going to get those errors? Looks to be a successful build. Let's launch it and see that the UI is changed, and then we can go through and apply the code to actually make this change the frame rate. Go ahead and go up to sample plugins and apply Smarty Pants. And as you can see, we're getting a no custom UI out flag, but param has UI width or height topic control flags. That might be the way they just set it up. I'm actually not sure what the issue here is, so I'm going to add a breakpoint in my param setup and go line by line and see if I can identify it. Sometimes when you port these projects, the hardest part is porting them, and then once you have that set up, it's pretty easy to modify the code and make it work. So apply Smarty Pants. We'll go line by line here. Yeah, it looks like the add param effect itself is our issue. So I don't know why Smarty Pants is acting like this, but I'm going to get the actual code I need. And I'm pretty sure in almost every other tutorial I've done, I haven't had this issue. But I'm going to go ahead and just grab a float slider X, and we're going to paste that into here. We don't need all this extra fluff. This must be old. I'm not sure exactly, but we're going to add a float slider whose name is frame rate. The minimum is going to be 1. The max is going to be, let's say 120. Min 1, max 120. Default 30. Then we need our proper disk ID name, which is going to be frame rate disk ID. Now I think this should work, but it's possible I need to change one other thing in the header file. Let's go ahead and launch it and see if it appears correctly. Go ahead and apply the Smarty Pants. Get rid of that breakpoint. Now we've made it in our actually render function. And if we just stop here, we can see we have our UI with our frame rate slider, which is perfect. The precision isn't what I want. I'm going to change that in just a second. But we do have our breakpoint here. Let's see if our frame rate param has a value. We should go into U, fs underscore d. As you can see, our value is 30. So we also have our frame rate value being dropped into our actually render function, which is good. If you are using a standard render function, that's not built into this example. But the same thing applies. You just need to get the frame rate value from a UI value. The same way, we're going to be applying this posterized time effect the same way for smart effects as well as a regular render, so that part won't change. You just need to be able to get that frame rate value into your main render or smart render functions. So first, let's fix the precision on our parameter. We'll go to the params setup, and you can see we have it set to pf precision integer. I want this to be set to probably thousandths actually. Set that to thousandths. And we'll go ahead and test this one more time before we actually go ahead and implement the code to posterize time. Maybe we should remove the invert effect as well. Just have it be a standard thing that we posterize. So import some footage, apply Smarty Pants. As you can see, it's actually doing nothing, which is nice. But we have our frame rate, which has 3 decimals. Maybe you could do less if you want. but it will offer you the ability to use very precise numbers. Now I'm going to go into my actually render function and see if we're getting inside of here. I just want to make sure that that's working. So yes, we are getting inside of here. Only thing we need to do is we just need to go into this invert pixel function. Let's start with the float, and we want to set the value, the input value, to be the output value. Nothing different. So I'll remove all this code. So we're going to get rid of all the code and just say out.red, or pointer to red, is equal to in red. Duplicate that for each channel: green, blue, and alpha. So what we're doing, instead of actually inverting the pixel, we're setting the output pixel to the input pixel. We're not changing the pixels whatsoever. We're just doing this to bypass it, but we are going to be changing the posterize time in a different section. So inside invert pixel 16 and invert pixel 8, I'm going to simply set the output pixel equal to the input pixel. Nothing's really changed there other than we're not inverting. Now, in order to apply the posterize effect, we'll go into our smart render, and you can find some code that says check out layer pixels. Now, if we go into our pre-render function, we're in smart effects, of course, we can find a thing called checkout layer. This is where our layer itself is sort of accepted and loaded into the plugin. This is also where we can modify the time at which it appears. So if I wanted to, you see here we have a current time value. If I just copy this, that's the current frame we're rendering. If I just set this to that hard value, this is going to freeze frame our clip at that time. So let's go ahead and restart the plugin here. We'll load some footage. Arguably it needs to be the same footage, and apply Smarty Pants. You can see we have a breakpoint. We'll just go past that, and we're actually getting no image. Requires effect reference, parameter index. We have that. Checkout, pre-render request, and a time. Let's just set it to, I don't know, 1000. I'm going to go ahead and purge the cache since I have used this clip quite a few times, and then I'm going to apply the plugin. I wonder if it has to be a certain multiple of the time step. What if I set it to 800? I also want to put a breakpoint in my actually render function. I want to see that we're getting into our functions here. Set a breakpoint there and Control-Shift F5 to restart. As you can see, sometimes plugins, even though they may feel like a simple thing, even just starting to port it or change the values can sometimes raise a few issues. But with a little bit of patience, we can work through it. Apply the plugin. You can see here our time looks good. I want to make sure all these values are decent first. Continue. Just get rid of the breakpoint. Then we're in format now. So we are running invert pixel float. Just want to double check. Output is equal to our input red, green, blue, alpha. So it looks like the time is what's causing the issue here. Let's go ahead and set it back to the default value it was at. Try this again. Apply the effect. And it appears to be straight black now. So the issue may not be in our current time here. It seems to be something else. When you have an issue like this, it's a good thing not to close your program. I'm going to undo a bunch of times and see if I can return to a state in which it was working. Here's when I just changed the slider precision to thousandths. Apply the plugin. And in this case, it's working again. So something that we did after that is what messed things up. Maybe if I focus on this, I'm going to set a breakpoint and see if maybe some of the values are wrong or something else is happening. Apply the plugin. Input red. Oh yeah, these values are coming in very odd. Like that blue color it's a good color, but the other values here are really messed up. Wonder if that's what's causing the issue, but these are also float pixels, so it shouldn't be a huge deal. Let's go ahead and go back to here. Let's set a breakpoint here and see what our input gives us. 1920 by 1080. The extent hit looks good. I'm going to change these values here to null because I don't know that we want to deal with those. We're using our input to our output. Let's go ahead and try that. Apply the effect. And we're getting an error now. Let's see if we can go forward. Doesn't seem so. Okay, next thing, we're using Iterate Origin. This needs to just be iterate. And then let's go ahead and double check our properties here. We have our in data, progress base, progress height, that's good. Our source, good. Our area, null for the whole thing, that's good. We have an extra argument. Let's try with just the iterate. Maybe iterating from the origin was the wrong thing to do. Obviously, it's a little bit frustrating how long this is taking, but of course I'll cut this up. It's taking a while to do some simple things, but it's also a good lesson of how accurate that is to reality, because that is what happens a lot of the time. Apply this, apply the plugin. All right, we're back in business. We just needed to use the iterate. Go ahead and replace these. Get rid of these extra arguments. Make this null. And our invert pixel float function is good. It's doing the original thing we wanted. Let's go back into our pre-render function and do what we failed at doing earlier. We'll go down to where we check out the layer, and instead of saying indata.currentTime or indata pointer to current time, let's make a multiple of 800. Let's just say 800 times 5 is 4,000. So we'll set this current time to be 4,000, and we'll restart to see how our extension, and we'll restart to see how our plugin works. Load up our layer, and now hopefully when we apply our effect, it's only going to stay at 1 frame. As you can see, I can go to all the times I want, but this is stuck at time 4,000, or what was that, 5 seconds. So that's working properly now. We can now manually input a time value here to give it a specific image based on that time. So what we want to do now is apply an algorithm which gives us the new time based on a posterized time slider effect. By the way, if you are using the render method, no smart effects, the basic checkout is the same. You just want to say checkout param, check out your input, give it the time value that we just gave it, like 4,000, and that will work the same way. This is the actual algorithm we're going to apply. I have comments here so we can go over what each thing here is doing. So if we just paste it, let's go over this line by line, and we have this final variable called time value. That's what we're going to be giving it instead of this arbitrary 4,000 number here. The time value is going to be the new time that it should display, given the posterized time effect, basically. So we start off with a variable called the frame number. When we are dealing with plugins, we're given not the frame rate, we're given the current time, the time step, what else? I believe the time scale, and these are different things than we're used to dealing with, like frame rates. So we need to manually calculate the frame rate and the frame number and stuff. So the frame number is the current frame number that's being displayed. Instead of this display here, you can see we have our frame numbers. We're going to grab the exact frame number, so we don't have to deal with minutes and seconds. We just want to deal with frame numbers. So we're going to get the frame number by dividing the current time by the in time step. The time step sort of is a way of denoting the frame rate. Then we're going to get a rounded frame rate because when we're dealing with these small decimals like 23.976, we just want to round that so it's easier to posterize the time easy. So then we're going to get our ratio, which is our desired frame rate divided by the layer's frame rate. Next, we're going to get the ratio between our rounded frame rate and the other frame rate of our layer itself. We're going to use this ratio to basically convert what frame we're looking at. Then we're going to get the posterized time step. The time step is a value that gives us sort of a pseudo frame rate, and we're going to get that by taking our in-data time scale, which is sort of the scale of time in the given layer. A lot of this is complicated, but you can use these to reverse engineer frame rates and stuff. And instead of the posterized value here, we have a parameter, which don't know that we can access in here. let's just go ahead and set this to 15 for now. We can bring in our variable in a sec. We're going to get our new posterized time step by dividing that random number, or our new frame rate, by the time scale. Then the amount of frames between each new posterized step is going to be our frame length. We're going to basically use our frame length mathematically to check whether or not we need to use this frame's original image or go to a previously rounded number. Again, I'm going into full depth on this, but if you want, you can simply just copy and paste the code. So we're getting our new frame length by dividing our ratio times our time step divided by our posterized time step. Then we have our time value. We're going to set this equal to our current time. Obviously, we don't always want that. So we're also going to calculate our parsed frame. Our parsed frame value is then going to give us the closest evenly divided frame number. If we're running a posterized time and it's down to 5 frames a second, there's obviously not an image changing every frame. So if we're in those in-between frames where it's not an image, we just need to go to the last rounded frame so it simply appears like that. Then we're going to clamp it. I noticed sometimes you can get negative frame lengths. So if it's less than 1 or 0, set it equal to 1, simple clamp. And then lastly, how do we check if we need to posterize this frame visual or not? If the current frame is not evenly divisible by our new frame length, we will force it to render the last even frame. So if our frame number modulus new frame length has a remainder, that means we're in between points of our posterized time. You can think of it like every frame is a point, but when you posterize the time, those points stretch out. When we have space in between them, we just need to jump to the ends. So then we set our time value equal to our in-data time step times our parsed frame. Then we can use this time value. Let's go ahead and run this plugin. We're getting an error. In this case, I think I just need to go into the properties, C++, and we're going to set treat warnings as errors to no, because I don't call that an error. Now we'll try and run it. Remember, we hard-coded in the posterized frame rate down to 15, so it's going to be not changing according to our slider. But let's go ahead and apply the Smarty Pants effect. You can see it's got a bit of like a GIF feel. It's not, the motion isn't completely captured. I need to quickly match this to our value here. So what I'm going to do is make a simple global variable. I'm just going to call this a global frame rate. This is going to be what we set our posterize effect to. And this is in JavaScript, so I'll make it a float. Global frame rate. By default, we'll set it to 30 because that's what the UI is set to. But in our actually render function, I'm going to set our global frame rate equal to our frame rate param p pointer to u fs underscore d dot value, which is our slider value. And that's not going to change until it actually renders a frame. But I'm going to replace this divided by 15 with our global frame rate. See if that will work. It might give us a strange behavior, but the goal is to link a parameter. And normally I would put this in something called the sequence setup data, which is a structure which is usually generated when you first apply the plugin, and then you can modify it later when they change the plugin parameters. But in this case, a global might work. Go ahead and apply the plugin. Right now it looks pretty normal. Let's set it down to 5. As you can see, pretty choppy. We start at frame 1. So we start at like frame 1, for example. Go for next frame, no change. Next frame, no change. Next frame, no change. Next frame, no change. And finally, at frame 6, we move on. That's what the whole purpose of posterized time is. You basically set freeze points, or you set goal points, and if you're in between those, you simply freeze it. So, we can change this to 1 frame a second, and it will give us a nice laggy effect. But yeah, that's pretty much the posterize effect. We can go in and modify it. If you wanted to get really creative, you could make this try and work on posterizing higher frame rates, but then you'd have to be able to interpolate between all that data. So that's basically it for this tutorial. I went into full depth on how you can create the posterized time effect. The hard part is 1, porting a plugin to do what you want. Sometimes the example plugins can be tricky or using conventions you're not used to. And two, the other difficult part is actually creating the posterize time effect and all the math required. I did this math a long time ago, so I'm sorry if my explanation wasn't perfect, but basically you want to think about it with simple terms where you can take a frame rate, your original frame rate, your new frame rate, and then interpolate what the proper time or display should be. Then you can use the pre-render or the render function to check out the layer at that particular time value and get the posterized time effect. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button. Down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out twice weekly in the channel. And down in the description, you can check out the code for this in the GitHub link. I'll go ahead and upload the Smarty Pants project with all the updated code so you can try it out for yourself, copy and paste it into your project, and good luck, of course, with porting it. Make sure you follow us in the description and on GitHub for coding updates and on Instagram for other live updates. If you're not already a member of the Discord server, you can come and join and get help with scripting, extensions, plugins, expressions, submit tutorial ideas, and much more. And if you'd like to help support us on YouTube, you can become a member, supporter, premium supporter, or VIP, get cool perks, hang out in the Discord, and much more. Thanks again for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.